I would have been arrested from home, probably 6 a.m. knock, I think it would have been, and would have been taken to Gough Barracks Armagh. In Carrickmore, that was our local detention centre. It used to be, if you lived in Strabane, you would go to Strand Road. If you lived in Carrickmore, you would go to Gough. And if you lived maybe in Belfast, you'd be taken to Castlereagh. It was like your local chapel. You know, what chapel do you go to? So anyway, I was taken to Gough Barracks Armagh, detained for a few days, and nearly always the interrogations, they called them interviews. Very often there was as many insults dished out to you by teams of detectives as actual questions. So they would question you, they would write everything down, they would insult you, as they did to me very often, about Gaelic games and about being educated by the Christian Brothers, coming from Carrickmore. So I went through a ritual of verbal insults and stuff like that, and questions about the alleged incident, and then I was informed a couple of days into that I was going to appear at the court in Cookstown the next morning, and I was then formally charged. So teams of detectives insulting you on the one hand and then asking you questions on the other hand. That was my experience at Gough Barracks. Even though I was only out of society and in Gough Barracks for a few days, you're now in the court, and it's lovely to have your family and friends at court, because I was very mindful that, you know, I'm advancing a just cause. All this environment is kind of oppressive, so in an oppressive environment it's nice to see your family and friends and to get that rootedness to back home again. And fair play to anybody that goes to the court and backs you up at a time like that. On arrival at the Crumlin Road, I was in a car with 3 RUC men, and I was handcuffed to one RUC man in the back of the car, 2 in the front. They didn't speak very much on the way up the M2. They did insult me a few times, tell me I was going to miss the summer and all that kind of stuff. But arrived at the Crumlin Road, these big doors opened up, arrived into Crumlin Road anyway. Whenever I was processed, one of the things I remember most was them offering me some substance like shampoo to de-louse. You know, this is all part of the degradation process. And then the very next day I would have been sent up to A-Wing, and that was a very good feeling, because now I was about to join Irish Republican prisoners in Crumlin Road Prison in A-Wing. And one of the memories I have of that is the tunnel till the yard. I mean, when I arrived in A-Wing, I was immediately put out onto the yard. We would have been 23-hour lockup and 1 hour in the yard. So I just happened to arrive during that 1 hour in the yard period. And I remember being pushed out through the dark, short dark tunnel, you might say, into the yard in the Crumlin Road. And then the light hits you and you see all these men, and they were walking in a particular direction, I think anti-clockwise. But of course I walked clockwise and walked straight into a group of men walking towards me. So somebody had the charity to turn me around. It was very structured. There was a large number of Republican prisoners in A-Wing in the Crumlin Road, and it was made known to us straight away that there were a number of men in charge. There was a structure, and I found it very helpful. There was an intelligence officer, an IO, and he seemed to be the only one that was permitted to get alongside you and maybe cross-examine you a bit on why you were there and your prospects at the trial. But then it was clear to me as well that there was a quartermaster, and there was also an OC, an officer in command. They seemed to know when to be diplomatic with the screws or prison officers, and they seemed to know when to be combative. Certainly I was part of a community and a structure that I felt comfortable in, and it was one of the first lifts I got, was to be part of this family. Letters were hugely important, and you knew that they were censored by the prison officers. They stamped them, you know, that they had read them and stuff like that. But you value a letter from somebody on the outside. Even a Christmas card was lovely. We felt particularly good, myself and H.E. Helen from Newry in the cell, at Christmas, when the prison officers were delivering our mail late at night, about 11 o'clock at night, and they put them under the doorway, and it went on and on and on for ages. And me and Hitchy smiled at each other in the cell that it was a good thing for the prison officers to work out that we had community support. Then letters, I myself wrote a lot of letters in the prison, censored ones and ones that weren't censored, comms that were of course put famously in stretch and seal and secreted in your mouth and passed to a visitor during a visit or whatever. The comms, you could be more intimate, you could be more private, you could tell the truth about how you felt and all of that. You could even carry out Republican business, which you would need to carry out. Well, the day tended to start where you heard the prison officers getting into gear, and they would shout out things like feeding. You know, they thought they were in a zoo, and talked about inmates, and they kind of walked about with keys, and you knew they weren't going to reach you because for quite a while, because it was a fairly long landing. And even then, when they opened the cell door in the first thing in the morning for you to slop out or whatever, it was minutes. It wasn't 10 minutes, it was like 3-4 minutes. Ablutions, you know, you went to the toilet, in that 3 or 4 minutes, maybe ran over to somebody's cell, lifted up the flap and shouted something in, but then you returned to your cell. And crucially, on top of the frame of your door, there was parked a pint of semi-skimmed milk, and that was really the start of the day, where you lifted down the pint of semi-skimmed milk, where if they didn't let you out of the cell, you emptied your chamber pot of urine or whatever, because conditions in the Crum and access to the toilets is something that'll live with me yet. You know, this thing of, you know, sometimes you wake up thinking you haven't studied enough for a school exam. Very often I wake up thinking that I need to get to the toilet, but I'm being denied access to the toilet, and I do believe that goes back to my experience in the Crumlin Road. But then back into the cell for the greater part of the day, so that meant, what did you do? I did a lot of writing, because I love writing and putting down my thoughts, and you would listen to the radio, and you would take a nap in the middle of the day, not that you were doing anything. You looked forward till a visit. If a visit was part of your day, that was a big, big thing. Your thoughts about a parcel was very important. What was going to be in this parcel? Would there be coconut delights, pink and white mallows? If there was, your morale was raised. And then at night in the cell, because you wouldn't get fed from 4 o'clock onwards, 4 o'clock was the last bit of food you were given at the door of your cell by a prison officer. It could have been a dollop of stew on a paper plate, but it tasted good to us. And then you would get nothing to the very next morning, when the brown bread and the semi-skimmed milk would reappear. So at 10 o'clock at night, we might have made toasties ourselves, where we turned the bin upside down, put toilet roll on top of the bin, and took the mattress off the bed and put bread on the springs of the bed, surrounded by bacon foil paper. So you would heat it up, a toasty with maybe tomatoes in the middle, and your cell would be smoked out of it, and the prison officers would shout in, "Toasties tonight, boys," because apparently they said themselves they hadn't even keys to open the cell door after a certain time in the evening, that it would have required a robot, whatever system they had in place. At least that's what they said to us, and that's how they justified not intervening when a lad in the next cell from Belfast took an epileptic fit one night. They didn't intervene, and we pulled them for it, and they explained that anyway. So typically that was your day. There would have been, I think, a door, a plastic knife, so that even if they managed to get the keys from a prison officer, they wouldn't be able to open your cell door, because their full intent was either to kill you or to scald you with boiling water. And, you know, very high profile UVF and UDA people, who I have no doubt were controlled by the British government, they would bang on your cell door and tell you little bits about your family and stuff and how they were going to sort out your family. Of release were high because the RUC might have kind of stitched me up a bit, but there was what they call a prima facie case against me. But all that began to crumble and fall apart after me being there about 9 months on 23-hour lockup. So I went to the High Court with changing circumstances, and the judge there recommended that I get bail, or decided that I get bail. So I got bail, which was the beginning of the end of my imprisonment for me. I still had a trial to undergo, but I was now out on bail after 9 months. The trial didn't unnerve me particularly. Wasn't sure whether I was getting out or whether I was going to get 10 years. I just hadn't a clue which was going to be the outcome. And maybe uniquely for me and a few others, I actually enjoyed the cross-examination by the QC, Gordon Kerr. He tried to undermine me and set traps for me, and I saw it as a battle of wits, a psychological game, a game with high stakes, but I fully embraced the spirit of the cross-examination. And anyway, the net outcome was that I was released from the court, found guilty, but they took into account that I spent 9 months in remand, suspended the rest of the sentence and all of that. I think they wanted to find me guilty, the system wanted to find me guilty because it would work against me later in life if I wanted to get a visa to go to America, or in terms of employability, the old guilty conviction thing works against you. Even though it was untenable for them to retain me any longer because it was genuinely a stitched up case, they did contrive a way of finding me guilty. And then when I was released from the court, as we headed home, we wouldn't have got 150 yards from the Crumlin Road court until we were sirened in again, and flashing lights and sirens, and pulled in again by the RUC. So I didn't get 150 yards without the whole rigmarole starting again, the whole rigmarole of oppression. But the court held no fears for me. I was an Irish Republican, not particularly impressed by the surroundings, had a job to do, which was to undergo a cross-examination, then leave it in the lap of the gods, and it didn't work out too bad for me. For the cell, who was in the middle of the landing? Only Ian Paisley, surrounded by officials and governors and prison officers and all kinds of officialdom. Before he knew it, he was shaking hands with me, and he said, "Who are you?" I told him who I was, and that I was a Sinn Féin representative, but that I had been mandated by the Irish Republican Army prisoners of war to meet him in cell 29. So I walked off in the direction of cell 29, and he walked after me. And Hitchy sat on the bed opposite me, and Paisley sat on the bed beside Hitchy. And Michael Hillen said to him, "Apologies, Mr. Paisley, for not being in a position to offer you tea." And he said, "Oh, I quite understand, I quite understand." And he reached over to me and he said, "You're Sinn Féin?" I said, "That's right." And he turned around to Hitchy, he says, "Well, if he's Sinn Féin, you must be Pyra." And the two boys shook hands, and Hitchy said, "That's correct, I'm Pyra." And anyway, the meeting started. It lasted about 20 or 25 minutes. And as he was leaving, I said, "Look, do me a favour, Ian." I said, "Call into cell 46. I says, "Say hello to Tony Miller from Derry City for me." I said, "And tell Willie McRae I was asking about him." So Paisley laughed, going out the door, that he would do both things. The meeting itself was cordial. We explained our position, that we weren't looking for fights inside the prison at all, but that it was completely illogical for Irish Republican prisoners to be put in one cell and loyalist prisoners put in another cell. Who designed that system? And it would want to be undone. Things happened on the outside, and our morale was raised if republicanism on the outside was doing well. If there were achievements on the outside, then that transmitted to us inside Crumlin Road. And whenever Irish republicanism on the outside had a good day, then we had a good day on the inside. And if it was a Tyrone good day, and we were always very parochial, then the Tyrone boys walked together in a group, and we walked faster than anybody else that day. it gave you an adrenaline, you know. But regularly you heard bad news stories. Regularly, you know, your friends were being arrested and interrogated and perhaps charged with things variously. And some Republicans that you knew or perhaps didn't know but were from the same part of the world as you, or indeed any part of Ireland, maybe getting killed in active service. That was a big thing now, and that would make you sad. And we would have weekly military parades, you know, military style parades anyway, you know, in Crumlin Road Jail on the Sunday, where you drilled and you responded till commands in Irish, and that was another part of making us feel like a community. One thing that is very important to me was the radio, and I'll never forget one night I was in the cell and just tuning the radio, and I came on a programme on downtown radio, and I got the intro to the programme, and the DJ said, "Tonight I interview Eamon McElduff, who was to be the lead singer in Stockton's Wing." But Eamon McElduff is from Killyclogher, and he and I were at Oma CBS together. Now, I was a seventh year and he was a first year, but we were both very Irish and Gaelic in our outlook, and we struck a common bond. And I remember in the cell thinking, am I lucky that I came on this programme at the start? So lay back in the cell and listen to this programme and listen to some songs from my friend Eamon McElduff, and it was like giving somebody a couple of £1,000. I was delighted to hear the Eamon McElduff programme on downtown radio. It just meant a lot to me. I would have been at a Republican funeral a very short time upon my release, and I was very conscious that I was kind of more sickly, believe it or not, or more kind of prone to these spots than nearly anybody else, because but that quickly got over. The other thing I remember is the brilliance of a fry. You know, see, getting a homemade fry and sitting on the sitting room floor eating a homemade fry was some luxury, you know, compared to the quality of the food that we got in the Crumb. This was rich, good food, and I thoroughly enjoyed a fry upon release. It was one of the first things I indulged in.